Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film Captain America: The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and I'm ready to climb that grease flagpole.
Today, we are talking about Minute 22, which begins with Steve entering his training montage and ends with Sergeant Duffy's Flagpole Challenge. Joining us again on the show today, we have Father David Mowry back. Welcome back. Let's talk about the montage.
Yes, the montage. But first, can you fellas kind of get me down from this rope wall? I there was the whole obstacle course set up to get into the recording studio today, and I'm kind of just yeah, thanks, yeah, and
so much barbed wire.
Oh, okay.
So much barbed wire.
I really appreciate the dedication to the verisimilitude here. It really puts me in the spirit of the training montage here.
We like to really put our guests to the challenge when they join us.
And we're going to choose that guest.
Exactly. So, all right. So we start off, we're still in the barracks. This is, we do reveal that it is Steve who is taking these books out. We already knew that, but yeah, Steve is taking his books out. He's getting organized. Meanwhile, and this is just, it's a montage. This is a very quick thing to show us, like, the types of soldiers that we have here, because going on behind you have 3 soldiers just kind of horsing around, kind of pushing each other and stuff like that. Some of the others are like making their beds and stuff, but that's generally what's happening in the barracks. And Steve just kind of looks at them. It's not like he's judging them. He's just kind of looking to see, this is what's going on here.
I do like that we have Steve unpacking books while we have 3 meatheads fighting in the background.
It says a lot.
Yes, he's exercising his mind.
The most powerful muscle of all.
Hodge doesn't even know how to read.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
What's interesting is here in the script, when we cut in here, we actually cut to Hodge, who actually is hanging up pictures of women on his by his bed. So it's a little more spelled out, didn't need to necessarily go there in the film. I'm glad that they didn't bother. I think that we just get enough. We've already had so much with Hodge just from the last moment. It's like we don't need to keep defining this very specific difference between these two guys.
There is such a thing as too much.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, at the cost of efficiency, like the most important thing about the montage here is, competing interests with the montage. And frankly, this is I think a challenge with the montage is it's not just a training montage. You also have to be able to hear what Tommy Lee Jones is saying. And I'm not going to lie to you. It feels like it took me 3 watches through this movie to realize he was telling us exactly what was going to happen, that we're going to pick one person out of the lot of you. He's describing the entire thing that's about to happen. But there's so much activity in the montage and so much, struggle and Steve falling off the ropes and everybody laughing at him. Like, there are a lot of competing emotional elements in this montage that are, I can see how you get to the other end of the montage and just Tommy Lee Jones is essentially a Peanuts parent, Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah, but the visuals don't communicate what Tommy Lee Jones is saying.
Yes.
And so I love me a montage, and I was watching a video that was analyzing the montage from the Hudsucker proxy, which goes through the whole development and marketing of the hula hoop, for kids.
Right.
And it's a great montage, but there's no voiceover. It's all done through the connection of the shots and the pacing and the editing that communicates everything you need to know about the marketing and the development and the lackluster sales and then the big turnaround and all the kids buying one. It's such a great, if folks have not seen the Hudsucker Proxy, I recommend they go and see it because it's a very unique Coen Brothers movie. It's one of the sunniest of their movies.
Yeah.
In this, it makes me wonder if we had a little more confidence in the audience, we could do without Tommy Lee Jones' monologue. Now, far be it for me to say we need less Tommy Lee Jones in a movie, but I think that we could have communicated things like the elimination of candidates by like having a shot of names being stricken off a list or some kind of some kind of shots that establish kind of getting settled into the camp. But again, like I said yesterday, there's so much story this movie needs to do that you need to cram as much information into these minutes as possible.
Right.
Well, and that's funny because, it's not like we ever really see anybody like eliminated, again, going back to this whole idea of these being candidates that they're looking for, as opposed to just new recruits who they are running through basic training to send off.
Right.
They're intentionally here because they are supposedly being looked at as candidates for the super soldier program.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'll be honest, there are so many soldiers at this camp that it does make me wonder, is this just a basic training camp? There are a lot of soldiers here who actually are just training for basic training. And maybe what's happening is, like, as people are whittled out, they're just moved over to a different barracks where they're just jumping into, okay, now you're just going to be a regular soldier and you're just going to head over there.
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, it's ill-defined.
If it was that kind of process, though, let's all be honest, Steve wouldn't make it past the first day.
No.
So
right.
it has to be a battery of tests, and then we evaluate at the end of the test rather than there being a kind of rolling elimination.
Well, but see, look, I think where we're going with the end of this minute, that part of the montage where everybody gets their turn at the flagpole, that's an example of a sequence in a montage that communicates why Steve would be allowed to stay. Right? Like, that is those kinds of sequences where we see some people failing and getting their names crossed off and some people getting their hands shaken and getting rides back to barracks is how you communicate this without the droning, the requirement of the droning voiceover, which I don't think, to me, it doesn't work. But to your point, do you ever go wrong with too much Tommy Lee Jones?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Well,
no,
but fine. But it's not like the hand jive, right? Like, somebody's not walking through, tapping the shoulder, say, okay, you're out of here. They're given a week. I mean, it still isn't a lot of time, but if you are paying attention to the voiceover, he does say at the end of this week, we will choose that man. So
that was so wild to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one week to test your mettle.
Talk about something you've never heard.
1 week. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I know. So it's interesting that they're given so little time, but really, and I guess that's the idea, is that, you may suck at the beginning, but if you really try hard, you could actually work your way up to becoming somebody great by the end of the week. And I guess that's the intention.
Can I go back to another point? What exactly does this have to do with the hand jive from Greece?
I'm just saying, the hand jive, the person is there as they dance. As they're doing their thing, somebody's walking around and eliminating them, and then you're out. So this isn't like the dance contest in Greece. That's where my brain went. I don't know why my brain went to Greece.
I just like to know things about you, and that you went to hand jive is one that I wanted to make sure that we really drilled in on. This minute doesn't have a lot going on, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to do a deep dive into your psyche.
How does Andy's brain work? Everything's better when it's a musical. Don't you know that, Pete?
Right.
Now, with all the comments I've made about some of the weaknesses of this particular montage, still there are some really great editing moments in this montage. Phillips' line about it starts with one man, and you get Steve's head swinging upside down into shot at that moment, just perfectly timed between the shots and the narration, because that is the one man this new army is going to start with, but he is upside down. He is not the right way up yet, and it's not the start that Phillips or anyone else is looking for, but Erskine is the only one who's standing on his head who actually sees the world right side up.
And they consistently do that. And I just have to call out Sergeant Duffy, who we introduce here mostly through voice, but we do finally see him. That's Damon J. Driver, who plays Sergeant Duffy. Just so you know, he's known for on IMDb this film, The New Canaan Revelations. I'm not sure what that is, but he was the writer on that. And then he was on Game of Thrones, and I'm guessing that this is why he's here and why he works probably on projects like this over in the UK, because he is the military trainer over there. He did military training on Game of Thrones, on Band of Brothers, and Game of Thrones is his third, and then he was the writer on Sedition. That's the third thing that he is known for, which was, let's see, what was that?
Oh, it's In Development.
It's in development. There you go. Yeah. So, which you rarely see in IMDb. But again, he's one of those people who's kind of a minor player in projects, mostly known as kind of the military trainer. But that is Sergeant Duffy, and he comes in as the voice that is kind of almost the mirror of those lines that you were just calling out, Father David, where Colonel Phillips is saying every army starts with one man. He falls and is hanging upside down, and you just hear this little voice kick in, "Rogers, get off of there!" And he kind of keeps popping up like that. Later when, and then of course this is where we have that bully moment of Hodge, where he kicks the arm of holding up the barbed wire, and it falls down on Steve as he's crawling under it. And you have Colonel Phillips saying he'll be the next or the first in a new breed of super soldiers. And then, of course, you have Sergeant Duffy. "Rogers, get that rifle out of the mud."
Yeah, I love that the sergeant's more worried about the rifle than he is about, Roger, that's great, drill sergeant stuff. Because that is the kind of thing a drill sergeant would have to do, is to inculcate an attentiveness to equipment, because a soldier is responsible for his pack and his gear. And so he has to, especially if you've got new recruits, they have to be aware that you can't just drag the rifle through the mud and expect it to work. You have to be aware, even as you're in this difficult situation, of all the gear you're carrying, because the soldier has to be ready after going through hell and high water to fire and to fight.
Yeah, right.
Now, you mentioned Hodge kicking out the post on this barbed wire course.
A lot of anxiety going on with that. A lot of anxiety. I didn't care for it.
Yeah, I mean, because honestly, I was more worried about Hodge than I was about Rogers, because his face is really close to the barbed wire. And I was surprised that he would be able to turn over like that.
Yeah.
Because in the shot with Rogers, that barbed wire is close. There's not a lot of clearance there. And Hodge must have found the divot or something, the ditch, where there's a little more room to operate. Sure. And I'm also, frankly, I'm surprised that Hodge doesn't get reprimanded, because this is not okay. This is going to slow everything down for everyone. I mean, he's bullying Rogers, and the drill sergeant doesn't seem so bothered about that. But just in terms of operational efficiency, this is not okay.
Right.
It's very much a bully move, as opposed to when they're climbing the cargo net, right?
Yeah.
Because he just looks down and laughs at the fact that Rogers, fell and got his feet tangled, hanging upside down. Mm-hmm. And that is like, more just like, oh, you're just a loser sort of thing. And this thing, though, you're right. It is something that's like, I mean, people are going to have to now stop all of this. They're going to have to walk through this. I don't even know how you do this in context of repairing this. Like somehow you have to get through it to get that post back up. That's like a lot of work.
Yeah.
But if you're a drill sergeant, do you? I mean, stuff happens on the battlefield. Maybe Steve just has to dig his way out.
Well, that Steve does keep going, which is why the Sarge yells
head down.
At him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With his rifle in the mud. Yeah. It's an interesting little moment. This is, I mean, in context of montages, it's a fairly short montage, because that's kind of it. We end up at this, at the trail where they're running, and we come up on the soldiers running. We see this flag. This is a very difficult flag to read, because it's flapping in the wind like crazy. You know that they had some wind machine just blowing this thing to get it visible like this. But I was able to pull it out. It says Nulli Secundus, which apparently in Latin means second to none. 1914, 1942, Camp Lehigh. So that's the flag. It's just a flag for the camp. I like that. I like this element. But I have a question for you both. Is this idea of this kind of contest to get a flag down, does it feel like this has become too tropey to climb up? I mean, I know, all I can think of is Mulan. I feel like it's something exactly. I feel like it's out there more though. But,
that is my precise note for this minute. It's just be a man with little music notes next to it.
I just wrote the Mulan flag moment. But.
It is for my generation, at least, because I came of age in the 90s. So any kind of scene like this for me is just going to trigger that memory of Mulan. I don't know if this is, I can't think of any other movies where I've seen this kind of thing. There's this idea of do the impossible task and get a reward, and we don't expect the hero to do it. And oh my gosh, the hero does it. And there's a nice payoff for this that we'll talk about tomorrow. It's kind of something where for me, as with any trope, so long as it's not, the problem is not that there is a trope. The problem is always in the execution of the trope. And if you can really polish something and do something a little bit different with it, I don't mind it. So in this situation, like, okay, I know as a moviegoer, as someone who has seen a movie before, okay, Steve Rogers is going to get this flag, but how is he going to do it? And that's where the reward comes in, where you may know the setup, but you don't know how it's going to happen. And in Mulan, the solution is more akin to climbing the pole than it is to something that a scrawny kid from Queens is going to have to do.
How does she do it in Mulan again? Oh, it's not the arrows. She uses
she has those weights, and so she wraps those around and uses those as a kind of a climbing gear.
It's almost like when you're climbing a palm tree or something to trim the thing. Yeah, right. That
just
sort of
counterbalance.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Right.
And they did it in Cobra Kai. Any Cobra Kai fans in the room? Cobra Kai fans in the room. So Kreese puts a pot on top of a 6-foot pole and says, kick it off the pole, and everybody tries to kick it and they can't do it, and then somebody kicks the pole and knocks it off. So it's that whole brain over brawn thing. It's funny. Like, I think about it and I think, well, surely that's been used a million times. And apart from those, I can't think of any others. Any other like clear examples of this particular trope that make it a trope.
I actually did some digging, and I ended up, on one of our favorite sites, the tvtropes.org website, which is just fantastic. It always lists great tropes. Mm-hmm. But it does have real life examples. And this is actually interesting because it does tie into the military. There are 2 examples here. On November the 25th, 1783, to signal the end of the American Revolution, the British greased a flagpole that still had the Union Jack raised before they left New York City. A man named John Van Arsdale managed to climb up the top and replace it with the American flag. But that's, I guess, part of the contest idea there. And then the other one, at the Naval Academy during graduation week, first-year cadets must climb a tall monument. It's about 6 meters high, smooth, and at the top is a hat that's worn by freshmen. The cadets must replace the hat with one worn by senior cadets. To make it even more difficult and force the freshmen to get creative and use teamwork, upperclassmen grease the monument heavily.
Grease the monument.
Yeah, so there you go. Some real life examples of them actually greasing flagpoles in order to kind of make this a big challenge for people.
Okay, we've really learned something here today.
It's important. These are the important. This is why we're here, Pete.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
This is why
these
we're
life
here.
lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. One other note about this area: this is not in the script. This whole bit with Steve having to climb this flagpole, or not climb the flagpole, but this challenge about this flagpole and getting this flag so you can get a ride back to the barracks, since they're only at the halfway point. I find this very interesting that it's set up this way. We're not going to get to kind of see the resolution of this till next time, but we do get the setup, and it's not in the script. And I want to talk to you about this, but maybe we'll save it for next week. What I do want to say is this was actually done I'm assuming in some pickup shots that they actually came back and added this whole bit. They filmed it at a place called Golden Oak Ranch, which it was interesting to kind of learn a little bit about this because it was actually a place. It's up in Newhall, California, kind of north of the LA area. And Disney actually leased this back in the 50s to film bits of Spin and Marty and the Mickey Mouse Club. They ended up shooting a ton of things in here, like Old Yeller and The Parent Trap, The Shaggy Dog. More recently, The Santa Claus, Pearl Harbor, Princess Diaries 2, Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. And even the Country Bears. So they have used this area a ton. I know. Hey, everybody's favorite.
A classic of modern cinema.
I can't wait to do the movies by minutes of that one, but we'll save it for when we're done with the MCU.
Yeah. Somebody's going to write that down somewhere and hold us to it.
Well, your comment about it being in pickup shots makes a lot of sense, because one of the notes I have is I absolutely love Haley Atwell's hair in this scene. I think it looks fantastic. And now that I know it's a pickup shot, that kind of explains a question I had. Like, as much as I love this do, it's not the hair she has in the rest of the scenes. And Peggy Carter does not strike me as the kind of woman who's going to try a different hairstyle each day of the week that she's there. She's just going to do what works and just get through what needs to be done. So there must have been that must have been what Haley's hair looked like, or someone on continuity didn't really care too much about Peggy Carter's hairstyle.
Yeah, they figured it's a different day or whatever it was. But yeah, it is different. And that's always one of those interesting things when you go back to look at these sorts of pickup shots. It's like, what is different here? Now, Steve is, going through so much CG work anyway that it's really difficult to tell like how much Chris Evans has changed from when they first shot to now. And unfortunately, we don't get great shots of a lot of the rest of people. But really, it boils down to Haley Atwell and her reactions here. So yeah, she's got a great look, and we'll see more of that next time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any last bits from either of you with this particular minute?
I just want to note that the ladies count is at 1.
Yes, it is.
True. I feel like if this were a video podcast, we would need a digital 1. Bling.
Yeah, intern, can we just put that up on the board?
Yes.
No? Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's fine.
Lady is on the board.
Yes. We did at least have Connie and Bonnie earlier, and we had the Stark girls. So there have been other women in the film, but, minor characters.
Those had yet to pass the Bechdel test. However,
that's true.
We'll note.
That is true.
No, but what I mean here is that the drill sergeant encourages the men by calling them by the wrong gender.
Yes.
So
ladies,
our ladies count is at 1 here.
Yes.
That's an excellent point.
There it is.
This is a bloomin' onion of misogyny we have going on right now.
The military. 1940s military.
1940.
All right. Well, let's do the Christ in the Cape bit for today. What do you say?
Oh, well, twist my arm. So, yesterday we talked about what the character of Captain America kind of gives insight into the person of the savior. But what about the saving itself? And so longtime listeners of My Bloviating will remember that this is soteriology, which comes from the Greek word meaning to save, soter. So how does Captain America save? And as I mentioned yesterday, this is a problem with the person of Steve Rogers and Captain America, that he is already a good man. And we'll hear, and not with my minutes, but next week, that point being made very emphatically and is very important to the character. But even though he's a good man, he's not yet a hero. He's not capable of saving. And so the salvation has to happen through strength. We talked yesterday about that spirit of the leader and of the men who follow are the ones who carry the day to victory. And Steve has not yet demonstrated that spirit of leadership yet. He is not one where he acts and others follow. No one else in the movie theater joins him in shushing the heel. Bucky is clearly the one taking the lead with the double date. And that kind of spirit mentality, it's just, there's nothing in the montage that indicates that Steve is well-liked or disliked by anyone in the group other than Hodge. We don't get a sense that he's picked on by anybody else, nor do we get the sense that he's Steve Rogers, we have no idea why he's here, but he's a good guy. So it's not until we have Captain America in all of his well-oiled glory that all of a sudden this possibility for leadership and this possibility for salvation comes out, because he has strength of character, but he's not yet a leader. And even after the super serum, you have, of course, that great musical number, because again, boy, like I said, the first hour of this movie, man, just so many possibilities, so many good things. But it's not until he actually risks physical danger that others follow him. So it's not enough that his moral character is strong, and it's not enough that he's obviously a fine physical specimen. He has to do something to earn that esteem from others that starts the ball rolling of him being a superhero, of being one who can save the day and not just in the propaganda reels. And that kind of idea of salvation, again, as a Catholic priest, is contrary to the story that I get up and tell every Sunday, which is the scandal of the cross. That what God does in Jesus Christ is something that does not look like strength. It does not look like leadership. It is something where weakness reveals the true power of love, which is ultimately what saves. This idea of willing the good of the other as other, even in and especially in the face of evil, in the face of sin and ultimately death. And even to take a step back from that uniquely Christian model of leadership, just even if you look to the wisdom tradition, honoring figures like Confucius, where there's an idea of leadership through wisdom, that it's not necessary that someone demonstrate physical strength or is willing to undergo great trials, that we can respect people who have a keen insight into the human condition, who are able to allow us to be more human. And so we look to saints and sages and prophets and teachers as people who we follow. I mean, I know every single listener has someone in their life who is this kind of wisdom figure for them, where there has been this leadership, and in a very small way, but for all of us, that sense of salvation, that sense of being healed, of being set free. Maybe it was that teacher who helped us in high school. Maybe it was that coach who pushed us past our limits, where in each of these circumstances, there's a kind of leadership and a kind of strength where there's not needed the performance in the face of physical danger, that we can recognize the goodness on its own terms. And again, as much as I love Captain America, he's my favorite Avenger, and I love him to bits. There is this struggle that the world Captain America lives in does not recognize goodness on its own terms, that it needs to be proven, it needs to be shown. Now, that's because, he lives in a comic book world, and that's how the story works. But in terms of how we appropriate the things this movie is trying to say about the human condition, it's important to think about how we can demonstrate that spirit that Patton talks about in that quote from the Cavalry Journal, and that leadership that Captain America does eventually demonstrate, without needing the super soldier serum in order to do it.
There's always that in one of these movies.
Yeah.
Can't just have somebody being good.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
it is one of those things, though. Like, I look at it from a perspective of both sort of conservation of character efficiency. Like, it's almost that we can't handle too many complexities layered on one character. Like, he needs to be sort of binary, because anything else is too much to wrap our heads around. We are too simple.
Well, and question to your point. So he's your favorite Avenger. Was he at this point, or is it because of additions to his character over kind of the later films that kind of adds to that puts him into that position?
Well, up to this point, we've had Iron Man, Hulk, and Thor.
Right.
And like Tony Stark was a lot of fun, but it was like, yeah, okay, but he's not really the kind of guy that I can see myself hanging out with. Like, yeah, I want to be Tony Stark. I just not where I was in my life. And, there's a lot going on with Hulk, and we'll just kind of take that and put that to the side. And then with Thor, I mentioned this last season. I like the gravitas of early Thor that goes away once other directors come in with a different creative vision. And that's, again, we're going to pick that up, put that off to the side. So I like Thor, but there was a certain Shakespearean quality to Thor that didn't kind of spark my fanboy interest. It didn't make me like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about what a great hero Thor is, and the journey and all that kind of stuff. So even in this point, I did like Steve Rogers from the introduction of the character. That here's a guy who wants to do what's right. He is not physically equipped to stand up to the evil of the world, but that doesn't stop him. And that scene with him and Erskine in the examination room, where it's like, I don't care much for bullies. I don't care where they came from. And that spoke to the moral goodness of the character after complicated and nuanced characters like Tony Stark and Thor. It was a breath of fresh air for me. Like, okay, here's a good guy. I want to see a movie about a good guy, and I'm here for, like Pete said, I'm here for something a little simple. It's upon reflection, as I think about it through my own lens of Christianity, that I start to think, oh yeah, but actually the more complicated characters make for some better, moral reflection.
Sure, right, sure. Well, and Steve does allow that, like as And this is what I think is interesting about both of your points about like his place right now, having kind of a more simpler feel. They layer more complexity on his character in later films. Like they take what we have, but they give us a little more in the next film and a little more in the next film, always kind of building upon that. And so that is something that is interesting about him, and really kind of, to a certain extent, what they're saying about like that type of a hero and somebody who believes in their country and what that means. So, yeah. All right. Really interesting. He's an interesting character, and I love talking about him because of all of these reasons. So, awesome. I don't think we have anything else for this minute. Do either of you have any last thoughts?
I got nothing else.
Not for me.
I want to see what happens with this grease flagpole, Andy. I have to know.
Oh, you will find out. You will find out in tomorrow's minute when we return. Father David Mowry, remind everyone where they can find you and learn more about what you do and the podcast that you've guested on.
Well, you can find me at my website, fatherdavidmowry.com. Like I said yesterday, I've got links to all my various appearances on Movies by Minutes shows. If you are interested in hearing me talk about a different World War II story, I was the host for 2 weeks of The Best Minutes, a Movies by Minutes podcast that went through the 1946 film The Best Years of Our Lives, which definitely takes a more nuanced approach to men fighting in the war and what it means to come home from that conflict and reintegrate into society. I had a lot of great guests on those 2 weeks to talk about the themes in that movie, and I'm really pleased with how those episodes turned out. So you can find that on thebestminutes.com, and you can look for my episodes there.
Outstanding.
Fantastic. Check that one out. It's a great movie and a lot of interesting conversations about that fantastic film. So that's it for now. So we will be back tomorrow with Minute 23. Thank you so much, Pete.
Andy, get that microphone out of the mud.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.